about a man with a movie camera. The first truly great modern documentary ever made promises what it delivers: a man in Soviet-era Russian moving about the city and capturing everything. Filmmaker Dziga Vertov essentially creates the grammar of cinema verite with his man with a movie camera, and nearly every documentary owes something to it. Modern in this sense means that it is a documentary that was more than merely pointing a camera and recording reality as it existed, with no thematic or subtextual dimension. This documentary at first merely seems to be an example of the point-and-shoot mentality that keeps YouTube celebrities in play, but what is lacking on YouTube is a little trick of movie making called associational editing. This underlying foundation of associational editing is juxtaposition, which is to say that one image is juxtaposed against another, usually in a way that seems completely natural, but which provides a texture or tapestry of meaning that in retrospect makes it clear the editorial choices were consciously made. An extreme example of associational editing would be the surrealist masterpiece Un Chien Andalou, in which images are juxtaposed to each other in a way that seems anything but natural in order to create subconscious connections that only become clear sometime afterward. Dziga Vertov's silent Soviet masterpiece A Man with a Movie Camera takes the exact opposite approach while remaining utterly true to the conceptual understanding of associational film editing. A Man with a Movie Camera does engage images that seem naturally connected to each other in a way that makes the documentary nothing more nor less than a film editing course compressed into one 68-minute lesson. By the time this documentary draws to a close, those who have been paying attention to the ways in which the man with the camera both composes individual shots and edits them together will have learned most of what they will ever need to know in order to manipulate the perception of reality and exploit both the intellectual and emotional engagement of film audiences. The cameraman. There is only one character in the film. Other people are shown, such as a woman getting dressed and going to get her hair cut, people exercising, an old woman, young boys and various other assorted people in the city, but they come and go and serve primarily as the backdrop for following the main character, the man with the movie camera. Played by the actual cameraman and the director's brother, this is truly a character within what otherwise is essentially an early example of cinema verite. What is particularly distinguishable about the cameraman as a character as he makes his way throughout a Russian metropolis teeming with life is that he is truly situated as a man with a movie camera. The camera that accompanies him everywhere is the old-fashioned type associated with the silent period from even modern motion pictures, the camera mounted on a tripod which can be flung over the cinematographer's shoulder and carried from site to site. In effect, the camera becomes a kind of secondary character. Between the camera and its operator, this almost serves as a buddy movie. Where the cameraman is, his camera will be found. Inseparable and as inextricably connected as the viewer and the film being viewed on the screen. Mikhail Kaufman is the only performer listed in the cast, although other people do appear in the film. Those other characters are incidental and mostly amateurs, some even were not entirely aware that they were acting. And quote. The reality is that the title of the film is doubly referential. The director of the film, Dziga Vertov, is a man with a camera, and Mikhail Kaufman is also a man with a camera. Vertov is directing Kaufman to perform several scenes in which he is essentially filming the setting up of the scenes that will be edited to create the meat of the content produced by the man with a movie camera. The director's real name is Denis Kaufman. Yes, the part of the cameraman in the film is actually played by the director's own brother. Mikhail Kaufman actually was a cameraman and also directed 2 films himself. Unfortunately, he and his brother experienced a professional parting of the ways due to that bugaboo of artistic differences. And quote. They would never work together again after this film, and it would be more than a decade before he would return to work as a cameraman. Na Dunny, released in 1940, would be his last film. Kaufman died in 1980 at age 82. Director's influence on Man with a Movie Camera. Dziga Vertov's influence on this film is far greater than the cinematic experience he created in 1929. It goes much further as he, with this film, invented techniques that are still used to this day, such as double exposure, fast motion, slow motion, freeze frames, Dutch angles, extreme close-ups, split screen, jump cuts, tracking shots, footage played backwards, stop-motion animations. His exploration of what the camera could do opened the world up to the wonders of making films. Vertov shows one of his intentions to reveal how the camera works to the audience by showing the camera and then relating it to something from the everyday world that people understand in order to explain it to them. For instance, when the camera's aperture is opening and closing, he shows us shutters on a window being opened and closed in order to allow us to understand the aperture's function in controlling how much light comes into the camera. Moreover, Vertov reveals how art watches life with the posters and drawings in the beginning of the film peering over at people as they sleep. The thematic here allows us to understand that this is what he is attempting to accomplish with this film, to use an artistic tool in order to peer into life, which then becomes art itself. Themes. One of the major themes in the film is that of art and life and how they interact and coexist. Movie making was relatively new at the time, so very little detail was known by the public as to how films were made. Vertov shows us the inner workings of creating work for the cinema and how real life is the subject for all art, even this new form coming onto the scene. Vertov creates a theme of revealing the process of making the film during the picture. This theme plays out when we see the camera show the audience how focus works, with flowers going in and out of focus, as well as aperture and its function being related to shutters. And he reveals how the lens of the camera is in fact like the human eye capturing life. A major theme of this film is simply life, capturing the day in the life of a city and the people who inhabit it, from them sleeping to their progress into their jobs, how they get around the city, how they enjoy themselves and escape. All of this in a period of a day captured by the cameraman. Quotes. Though this is a silent film, these are important subtitles describing a transition in the film. We see how in one single place people can be filled with such joy as from being married, to such loathing during the signing of divorce papers, and finally such grief as they arrive to sign death certificates. Other than these subtitles, there are no spoken words that we actually hear in the film. Analysis. Man with a Movie Camera is very simply a film about a man capturing life in the day of the lives of people from Kiev, Kharkov, Moscow, and Odessa. It begins with people waking up and getting their days started. It also shows what the city looks like while the people sleep, its emptiness. We see the machines in factories not moving. Then, we see how people are the ones which influence progress even though the machine creates the result. Vertov shows us the dizzying pace of life as it has quickened with street cars, machines and people all attempting to get from where they are to where they are going. The director also reveals to the audience quite simply how a camera is used in imagery throughout the film. It allows the public to understand more readily just how these moving pictures are made, as the medium was very new at the time of release in 1929. Symbols, allegory, and motifs. The seats in the cinema begin to fold down without the assistance of any person to move them. This is a symbol of welcoming people to the theater, inviting them into the picture. The cameraman is seen with his camera and stands atop an even larger camera. He then walks into the larger camera. This is a symbol that he is going to be the eye of the camera and the storyteller in the picture we are about to see. We see posters and pieces of art depicting people looking out in such a way as they seem to be peering at a woman sleeping in bed. This is a symbol that art, or the camera, is capturing real life. We see pigeons all flocking to a landing on a building while the cameraman drives through the city. This is a symbol that they are lining up to see the cameraman's work with the film camera. Shutters on a window are opening and closing during a scene cut with images of the camera opening and closing. This is a symbol of the camera's aperture and how it works, allowing more or less light in. Irony. No sound. The film is completely silent. We don't hear anything at all, ironically, until the film is put on the reel and begins to play at the cinema. No actors. We watch and see children asleep on the streets. Ironically, these are not actors but real people. The imagery pierces us with the reality of life in Russia. Life. We see machines in a factory during the opening of the film. Ironically, though they have great power to produce, they only come to life when they are given the go-ahead from the people who must run them. Tracking. We see the cameraman filming in the streets for material to be put into the film. Ironically, in order for us to see him doing this, we realize that he himself is being followed by a camera. Thus, everything is captured, including him. Stop motion. The film comes to stillness as we see photographs for several frames. Life is still. Ironically, this is done in order to show the viewer how editing works, by putting several still photos together in a row and moving them. Imagery, art and life. Vertov shows the combination of art and life in the imagery in this film. We see posters and a drawing of an old man peering into the bedroom of a sleeping woman. These images show us that art gets its form from the truth of life, that art is always paying attention to life in order to draw its inspiration. Mannequins. We see several shots of mannequins in the film. This imagery shows us the separation between reality and what is fake in the beginning of the film, that there is a difference between what appears human to what actually is. Camera work. We are shown the camera and then the image cuts to shots of what the camera is doing, how it is functioning. We first see this with the focus and the flowers coming into focus. Then we watch as the imagery shows us how the aperture on the camera works by relating it to the shutters on a window opening and closing. High wire act. We see the cameraman walking on a high catwalk above a bridge with his camera in tow. This imagery shows us that filmmaking is far more than turning a camera on. It's a high wire act with a great deal more action and risk that one may expect. Literary elements. Director, Dziga Vertov. Leading actors/actresses. The film has no actors since the only people shown through this documentary are normal citizens who remain anonymous. Supporting actors/actresses. Since there are no leading actresses and actors, there are no supporting characters either. Genre, documentary film. Language. This movie is a silent one and there are no intertitles or written commentaries. Awards. The film was given no awards since at the time it came out it was seen as not something worth analyzing. Date of release. The film was released on January 8, 1929 in the Soviet Union. Producer, Dziga Vertov. Setting and context. The action takes place in the year 1928, when the documentary was filmed, and the action takes place in various cities all across the Soviet Union such as Kiev, Kharkov, Moscow, and Odessa. Narrator and point of view. The film gives the impression that the actions are shown from the perspective of a first-person subjective narrator. Tone and mood. The mode transmits restlessness and anxiety, and this is done through the rapid way in which the narrator films his subjects. Protagonist and antagonist. The protagonists are the normal men and women filmed going through the motions of everyday life. Because of the nature of the documentary, there are no antagonists. Major conflict. While the film has no major plot and as such no defined conflict, we can claim the major conflict is between the rich and the poor, since the documentary shows the lives of the two social classes. Climax. The film reaches its climax at the end of the day when the people filmed go to bed. Foreshadowing. Among the first shots shown in the film is a homeless man waking up. This scene is used to foreshadow the later more tragic scenes shown in the film, such as the instance in which a woman gives birth. Innovations in filming or lighting or camera techniques. The documentary is regarded nowadays as being one of the most innovative films in history. It is seen as being the first time when techniques such as superimposing, freeze frames, multiple exposure and Dutch angles were used. It is now considered as being the 8 greatest films ever made, and this is in part because of the innovation in camera techniques used throughout the film. Illusions. One of the main illusions in the film is the idea that social inequality is something that can't be fixed, and that it is better if a person just learns how to ignore those things which may make them uncomfortable. Paradox. A paradoxical idea is the way in which the documentary jumps from one tragic event to a happy or even mundane event, transmitting the idea that everything is normal and without showing any type of sympathy for those who are suffering. Parallelism. A parallel is drawn between the rich and the poor, the purpose being showing to the viewer just how different the two classes were living. Essay. Why is this film considered so important to cinema? Dziga Vertov's film is considered important to cinema as the techniques he and cinematographer Mikhail Kaufman used became techniques that are still used to this day in filmmaking. They developed stop-motion animation, tracking shots, footage played backwards, double exposure, slow motion, fast motion, freeze frames, split screens, jump cuts, Dutch angles and extreme close-ups while making this film. What is the significance of the poster with people peering into the sleeping woman's room? Vertov shows us these images of posters on the wall as if they are looking at the sleeping woman in order to reveal to us that art is peering into real life. that the camera is art and in the same way will be peering into the everyday lives of the people in the city. It also shows art's desire to be like life, to be fully inhabited rather than just a single moment in time, and cinema comes closer to that than paintings or photographs, as there is motion and actual life being captured and retransmitted onto the silver screen. What is the meaning of Vertov showing the empty machines in the beginning of the film? Vertov shows us machines in factories during the beginning of his film. Then people come to bring these machines to life during their work day. The imagery shows us that though there is great output from these massive machines, they require man to make them move. In the same way, though the camera creates the film, it requires the cameraman to tell it what and where to capture life. Man with a movie camera. The film opens with the cameraman on top of a camera. He descends into the larger scale camera. He then walks behind the curtain of a movie theater. People begin to arrive for the show. As the film is put into the reel, the music begins to play. We see a woman asleep in her bed and then children asleep on park benches. The city is still asleep. We are then shown mannequins. The city has yet to awaken. Factories and shots of people beginning to walk in the streets. We then see a car arrive outside of the cameraman's home to pick him up. He begins to go to work filming in the city. He films a train, a woman waking up and getting ready for the day, children and men awakening from their sleep in the streets. We then see the camera lens pulling in and out of focus as we see flowers come into focus, and then we are shown shutters opening and closing as the aperture on the camera opens and closes, showing us how the camera works. The city really starts to come alive. Men pulling airplanes, streetcars being lined up. People are now bustling in the streets. We begin to see the machines that were shown earlier come to life as people begin to use them in their jobs. We see a rush of people as gates are opened. A woman brushes her teeth in a close-up. We see more and more cameramen getting shots of movement throughout the city. We see the trains, cars of people, dogs walking, horses and buggies moving throughout the city. Then there are still photos that are cut into the film, which goes from rapid movement to stillness. This leads into the editing process. We are shown how these still photos become life captured into the cinematic frame. The cameraman then shows us a couple signing a wedding registration while another signs divorce papers. Finally, we see the grieving sign death certificates intercut with grieving people at graves, a death procession, a woman in labor, a couple entering a carriage on their wedding day. The woman gives birth and the cameraman sets up going up an elevator. Then we watch as the street trains intersect in overlapping frames and the screen begins to become dizzying. A man with a head injury is shown being treated as an ambulance comes for him. A fire brigade is dispatched, and we next see a woman having her eyebrows done, another woman with her hair washed while a man has his beard shaved. All of this is intercut with people performing their jobs, washing clothes, sharpening an axe for instance. We watch as cash transactions are made, a woman creates wrappers for an assembly line, phone operators connect calls, cigarettes are packed into the boxes the woman was making. The speed increases and increases until we see a pair of hands typing, playing piano, a gun appears. It all moves faster and faster until once again the pace slows inside of a cave where a man uses an axe to pick away coal in a mine. We are moved inside of a factory as elements from the earth are melted before being taken back to one of the machines earlier seen in the film as the cameraman films oncoming water from a river in the city by using a crane to lift him above the water and string him across the width of it as well. The frames once again speed up and show the cameraman intermixed with shots of machines working until he is back in the streets filming street cars. We then see women combing their hair and men washing their faces in the bath as the workday ends for them. This all before a shot of a tree in the sun. Next we see people crowded onto the beach, then people doing exercises. We see a workers' news report being put together and then a woman throwing a discus, performing a high jump. Men then begin the high jump and pole vault as people look on, and a group of men play volleyball. Hurdles are performed. We see people begin to watch horses running at the track before a man dives into water followed by a group jumping in the water. People exit a boat as a woman puts mud on her body and another applies lipstick. Another woman uses mechanical exercise equipment. The cameraman is seen washing the mud off of his body as a magician performs magic tricks for children. We are then taken through a woman working out. more shot put, women playing basketball, a man throwing a javelin and men playing soccer. Then, a carousel moves around and it is intercut with men riding motorcycles. Next we are taken inside a bar where a beer is poured into a glass and the cameraman is seen inside the glass. We see a woman shooting targets. Chess and checkers matches are seen inside of the Lenin Club. Then bottles and spoons are being played as instruments. We are back in the movie theater and we see people watch as the camera stand moves without human assistance and the camera attaches itself to the stand and begins to move. The stand then walks out of frame with the camera and the camera case closes and slides off. The screen in the theater goes black and white before dancers are seen with someone playing the piano. We then see large crowds of people in the city that the cameraman captures. We then see the eyes of the woman cutting the film before the aperture on the camera closes with the eye still superimposed on top of it looking out at the world. Let me know your thoughts on this video in the comments.